Hello, everyone. My name is Brady Lund. I am a first year PhD student at SLIM, but just about 2 years ago, I would have been exactly where you are now in my very early classwork here at the SLIM's MLS program. Today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about disability and diversity in library and information organization settings, library and information employment, those uh, range of topics. So the first thing I really wanted to emphasize is that disability and diversity lasts throughout the lifespan. And that's something where there's a lot of great literature coming out in library and information science about services to individuals with disabilities, especially children with disabilities, and that's very great and useful literature that everyone should be reading. However, just visiting the library is such a small part of the entire lifespan for the individual, and so we can really broaden out and think of what else can a library do to help individuals with disabilities, whether that be help them to identify jobs or to actually employ individuals with disabilities. Libraries as a service oriented profession, librarianship should really be focusing on ways that we can help these marginalized populations seek employment and to kind of fulfill what it means to be a human being, because work is such a big part of how we identify with who we are, um, that for those who are unable to find work, even though they are qualified to do so, is a tremendous barrier and a tremendous weight that's on their shoulders, that they can't participate in the economy. They can't work just because they are differently abled, even though they are qualified for the positions in which they are applying. And this is really a global cross-disciplinary crisis. So it's by no means just in librarianship where this problem exists. It's everywhere that these barriers exist. However, because librarianship is that service oriented profession, I think we have a certain level of additional empathy and understanding that makes it possible for this to be the profession that really takes the lead in issues like employment for individuals with disabilities. And additionally, the types of duties that librarians and library assistants do are generally roles where individuals with disabilities can really excel and perform well. And there's been plenty of anecdotal evidence and some research to suggest that that is the case. So we also need to look at problematic language. And in Dr. Dow and my research, we looked at job descriptions. However, problematic language exists in basically every context you can imagine. And we really need, I believe, to look at how we use language in a similar manner to how we look at providing information to patrons. And so if a patron comes in and they are asking questions or seeking a resource that is at a fairly basic level, it would not make sense to ask these very complex questions that they would not be able to either comprehend or provide full answers to. And so you have to identify the level of comfort that the individual you're communicating with has and try to communicate at that level, not speaking down, but speaking appropriately. You don't want to speak over somebody's head either. And oftentimes we're so anxious about not wanting to speak down to somebody that we don't even try to speak at somebody's level. And I see that a lot, even, of course, in higher education, a lot of times as well, where we're too afraid to look at our audience and say, this is the level we need to talk at. And so everyone can have the best opportunity to be successful. That's important for everyone, not just people with disabilities. But if you frame it from the perspective of the individual with disability, it's very easy to understand how they might have challenges understanding language, specifically if they have a communication disability or disorder. You can understand why they would have problems understanding language, but everybody has trouble with ambiguous language and jargon. So I can give an example of this, perhaps. So I've been working on a couple of books with several different publishers, all within the field of LIS. And regardless of the publisher, that you are always told to write at a low-level high school level, even if your intended audience for your book is MLS, credentialed librarians, PhD professors. You're really supposed to write at a low-level high school level, because you never know who will pick up your book. And you want your writing to be accessible to as many people as possible. You want your ideas to be diffused to as large a population as possible, to be as impactful as possible. And if you write at a very high level, that might be meaningful to a few people who read it, but there's a large population out there that's just not going to receive that information. That information is just going to go over their head, and that will be that. And so you can talk about complex ideas while speaking at a low-level high school level. It's not particularly difficult. It requires more explanation, but you can break down the complexity significantly and make very complex topics easier to understand for a general audience without causing too much additional hassle, just by really thinking about what you're trying to say and rephrasing it using simple language that can communicate that information to the audience. You should also think about how we are always communicating, and that's whether or not we are using language. Everything we do, including my gestures, my eye contact, the tone of my voice, communicates something to the individual. And individuals with disabilities, even if you think they are not particularly adept at picking up on those cues, are able to, and it does affect their emotions and their response to you. And so I was taught in my undergraduate program, being from a speech communication language undergraduate program, that Mr. Rogers is really a good model to look at as to how you should communicate. He used a low level of speech, actually 125 to 135 words per minute, and he did that based on research he had come across, and he studied quite extensively child psychology and language and those topics. He is a very well-read, well-educated man. That speaking at 125 to 135 words per minute is really ideal for language comprehension. Even adult human beings can't really understand language spoken at a rate higher than about 140 to 150 words per minute. And so there's a lot of people, even newscasters, who are talking so fast that it is neurologically impossible for you to understand every word they're saying. You might think you do, but in fact you're just filling in gaps based on context clues in how they're speaking and what you think they should say. But neurologically, if you examine it, you're not picking up every word somebody says if they're speaking greater than 150 words per minute, which a lot of people do. And so he learned to speak that way. He learned how to use gestures very carefully and the tone of his voice to always sound comforting and welcoming. And that is why children flock to his show, even though it's not a particularly interesting or compelling show. Children today still enjoy it because of he knew child psychology, he knew neurology and how individuals understand communication and language, and was able to use that to create this program that is so compelling. So referring again to Dr. Dow and my research, and so job descriptions are really just the first step in a whole process of library employment. And in speaking to this in the past, I realized how important it is to emphasize this part specifically because we did study job descriptions, but really I've studied all aspects of employment for individuals with disabilities, particularly individuals with autism. And this language that we identified in the job description research is language that exists throughout the library profession and within the field of LIS, and really within every profession, to be honest, as I said before. But the job description is the first exposure a potential employee has to the library. And so I would say that it is the most important place to be very clear about what you are looking for, because it is the first communicative exchange between you and that individual that is applying for the job. However, the same takeaways that we have for the job description research is the same things you should think about when you're doing the interviews, when you're actually modeling the job duties when they start. And that's something that's very important as well, is to keep the communication going throughout the entire lifespan of the career for every employee. You should have no different expectations for any employee. You hire them because of the skills they have, not because they do or do not have a disability, and you work through that process in the same way. You model the job duties somebody's supposed to do. That benefits everyone. If the first 2 days where they're working, you can come in and say, watch John today do what he does, that's going to be a good model for what you need to be doing when you're working. And then the second day, have John watch the new employee while they go through the duties and provide feedback. That way, you can really tell that the new employee is doing what they're supposed to be doing, is picking up on what they should be doing. Or if not, you can help guide them to do what they need to be doing that they're not doing presently. And so again, that benefits the organization because you know the employee's doing what they need to be doing for your organization to be successful. And it benefits that individual, of course, because then they know they're doing what they need to be doing. So it's really a win-win situation in that case for everyone. Kind of finish up or wrap up my little discussion here. I just want to really advise you, as you come into the profession of librarianship, to think of it as something that really has the opportunity to create a major impact on people's lives. And I think you all probably understand that. And that's probably what drew you into the profession to some extent. But just think of the ALA, American Library Association's kind of tagline is libraries transform. It's not books transform or reading transforms. Those are important, of course. That's an important service that libraries provide. But the tagline is libraries transform, because libraries are so much more than just books. They're about service and what we can do to help everyone in our community and really bolster the community and be a cornerstone of our community. And hiring diverse populations, hiring individuals with disabilities, taking the lead on those issues is just one way that we can really make that major impact. So those are just some things to get you thinking about, that Libraries Transform tagline, and what you can do to transform your community once you are in the position you're in currently, or once you get that library job. What can you do to make that impact, to really transform the community around you? And think about that as you engage in public interactions with reference and teaching, how you can transform not just librarianship as a job, but that libraries and librarians can really transform people's lives. And that's what librarianship really is. So thank you for listening to me. If you're interested in reaching out, if you have any questions, my email is blund, L-U-N-D, 2 at g.emporia.edu. So you can reach out to me there. Thanks, everyone.